Hi, everybody. Welcome once again to Ann Angel's Reading Room. And today we are going to finish the great epic poem called The Courtship of Miles Standish by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Right now, we're ready for the very last section. If you remember last time in section 8, we were reading about how John and Priscilla were sitting and she was spinning at the spinning wheel and she and John were sitting talking and he was just enjoying her company so much. And then they found out that Miles Standish was dead. And John was so upset because his good friend was dead, but then he realized, oh my goodness, now I can marry Priscilla. And so today we get to read about what happens now that he and Priscilla can get married because he won't feel like he's betraying his friend anymore. So this is section 9, the last section of this poem, and it's called The Wedding Day. From the curtain of clouds, from the tent of purple and scarlet, issued the sun, the great high priest, in his garments resplendent, holiness unto the Lord, in letters of light on his forehead, round the hem of his robe the golden bells and pomegranates. Blessing the world he came, and the bars of vapor beneath him gleamed like a grate of brass, and the sea at his feet was a laver. This was the wedding morn of Priscilla, the Puritan maiden. Friends were assembled together. The elder and magistrate also graced the scene with their presence and stood like the law and the gospel, one with the sanction of earth and one with the blessing of heaven. Simple and brief was the wedding, as that of Ruth and of Boaz. Softly the youth and the maiden repeated the words of betrothal, taking each other for husband and wife in the magistrate's presence, after the Puritan way and the laudable custom of Holland. Fervently then and devoutly the excellent elder of Plymouth prayed for the hearth and the home that were founded that day in affection, speaking of life and of death, and imploring divine benedictions. Lo, when the service was ended, a form appeared in the threshold, clad in armor of steel, a somber and sorrowful figure. Why does the bridegroom start and stare at the strange apparition? Why does the bride turn pale and hide her face on his shoulder? Is it a phantom of air, a bodiless spectral illusion? Is it a ghost from the grave that is come to forbid the betrothal? Long had it stood there, unseen, a guest uninvited, unwelcomed. Over its clouded eyes there had passed at times an expression softening the gloom and revealing the warm heart hidden beneath them. As when across the sky the driving rack of the rain cloud grows for a moment thin and betrays the sun by its brightness. Once it had lifted its hand and moved its lips, but was silent, as if an iron will had mastered the fleeting intention. But when were ended the troth and the prayer and the last benediction, into the room it strode, and the people beheld with amazement. Bodily, there in his armor, Miles Standish, the captain of Plymouth. Grasping the bridegroom's hand, he said with emotion, "Forgive me. I have been angry and hurt. Too long have I cherished the feeling. I have been cruel and hard, but now, thank God, it is ended. Mine is the same hot blood that leaped in the veins of Hugh Standish, sensitive, swift to resent, but as swift in atoning for error. Never so much now was Miles Standish the friend of John Alden." Thereupon answered the bridegroom, "Let all be forgotten between us, all save the dear old friendship, and that shall grow older and dearer. Then the captain advanced and, bowing, saluted Priscilla gravely, and after the manner of an old-fashioned gentry in England, something of camp and of court, of town and of country commingled, wishing her joy of her wedding and loudly lauding her husband. Then he said with a smile, "I should have remembered the adage, if you would be well served, you must serve yourself. And moreover, no man can gather cherries in Kent at the season of Christmas." Great was the people's amazement, and greater yet their rejoicing, thus to behold once more the sunburnt face of their captain, whom they had mourned as dead, and they gathered and crowded about him, eager to see him and hear him, forgetful of the bride and bridegroom, questioning, answering, laughing, and each interrupting the other, till the good captain declared, being quite overpowered and bewildered, he had rather by far break into an Indian encampment than come again to a wedding to which he had not been invited. Meanwhile, the bridegroom went forth and stood with the bride at the doorway, breathing the perfumed air of that warm and beautiful morning. Touched with autumnal hints, but lonely and sad in the sunshine, lay extended before them the land of toil and privation. There were the graves of the dead and the barren wastes of the seashore. There were the familiar fields, the groves of pine and the meadows. But to their eyes transfigured, it seemed as the Garden of Eden, filled with the presence of God, whose voice was the sound of the ocean. Soon was their vision disturbed by the noise and stir of departure, friends coming forth from the house, and impatient of longer delaying, each with his plan for the day and the work that was left uncompleted. Then, from a stall near at hand, amid exclamations of wonder, Alden the thoughtful, the careful, so happy, so proud of Priscilla, brought out his snow-white steer, obeying the hand of its master, led by a cord that was tied to an iron ring in his nostrils, covered with crimson cloth, and a cushion placed for a saddle. She should not walk, he said, through the dust and heat of the noonday. Nay, she should ride like a queen, not plod along like a peasant. Somewhat alarmed at first, but reassured by the others, placing her hand on the cushion, her foot in the hand of her husband, gaily with a joyous laugh, Priscilla mounted her palfrey. "Nothing is wanting now," he said with a smile, "but the distaff. Then you would be in truth my queen, my beautiful Bertha." Onward the bridal procession now moved to their new habitation, happy husband and wife, and friends conversing together. Pleasantly murmured the brook as they crossed the ford in the forest, pleased with the image that passed, like a dream of love through its bosom, tremulous, floating in air or the depths of the azure abysses. Down through the golden leaves the sun was pouring his splendors, gleaming on purple grapes that, from branches above them suspended, mingled their odorous breath with the balm of the pine and the fir tree, wild and sweet as the clusters that grew in the valley of Eshcol. Like a picture, it seemed, of the primitive pastoral ages, fresh with the youth of the world and recalling Rebekah and Isaac, old and yet ever new, and simple and beautiful always, love immortal and young in the endless succession of lovers. So through the Plymouth woods passed onward the bridal procession. And that's the end. Did you like it? I like it. The courtship of Miles Standish turned out not to be a courtship for Miles at all, did it? It turned out to be the courtship of John Alden and Priscilla. Yes. But Miles Standish, he's a good friend to both of them, I think. Now remember what we said at the very beginning. This poem is based on the true story of the Pilgrims in Plymouth, their first few years there. Isn't that amazing? in our history, in America's history, that there would be a story kind of like this one. We don't know how much of it is true, maybe none of it. But we know this, all three of those people really existed. Priscilla and Miles and John Alden. They all came over on the Mayflower. They all lived through the first winter. And we do know that John Alden did marry a girl named Priscilla. I think it's a pretty great story, don't you? All right, so next time I will see you when we start the book, one of my very favorite books, called Charlotte's Web. I'll see you next time. Oh, and one more thing. I love you, Baba Bear. I love you, Lala Bear, from Baba Bear. Bye-bye.